Hello, Heat Seekers. It's RotoHeat Rick back with another special guest. I have Shane Barrett from Fantasy Nightcap Podcast and Paulies Playoff Organizer. He's got an interesting take today. Shane, why don't you fill us in on that?
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me on here. My player for today is Kyren Williams, and my hot take is that he will outscore James Cook this year in fantasy football.
I love it. As a Notre Dame fan, I really hope the best for Kyren Williams, and seeing how he dropped in the whole draft process was a little painful. I was rooting for the kid.
Agreed.
But James Cook is one of those guys that got a lot of hype, gets to go to the Buffalo Bills, and people are anticipating him being the pass catcher. But I hear you've got some knowledge that is going to counter that.
Yeah, so a couple points that I wanted to make before even getting to the receiving work are just like points on why I think this is possible. One, the backfields for both teams are full. You've got Akers, Henderson, and Williams for LA. Then you've got Cook, Moss, and Singletary in Buffalo. My worry with Cook is that there's too many mouths to feed in that offense where I feel like he will fit in well as the pass catching back in Buffalo, but I don't see him getting much more work outside of that because that's where I feel like Singletary and Moss will come in. The other factor is Josh Allen's a rushing quarterback. He's basically their goal line back and has been for the last 2 to 3 years. My expectations for Cook are lower, at least from a ceiling standpoint. I think his floor may be there. With Kyren Williams, Akers is coming off that significant injury, and I've been lower on Akers for a while, and so the injury just makes me even more nervous. Henderson, I think, is just a guy, and then Williams, I said all offseason, I think he should have been considered up there with the top tier backs in this class. Draft capital didn't do anybody favors in this class from an offensive skill standpoint. I've got all the draft capital for it. Singletary was round 3, Moss was round 3, Cook was round 2. Akers was round 2, Henderson was round 3, and Kyren was round 5. The difference with Kyren and I believe Akers, if I remember correctly, is LA traded up to get them. So that's a part that I factored into why I think Williams can outscore him. I think Williams is the best back in this backfield in LA, and that's another part of my hot take. But to your original question, receiving back is where I think both of these guys will fit in to their roles best, and then that will get them on the field. And I've also said Kyren Williams is the best pass blocking running back in this class. I stand by that. Like you're a Notre Dame fan. You've watched the Clemson 2020 game. He saved Ian Book's butt in that game. But I was looking at some stats to prep for this, and Kyren Williams actually has first most receptions and second most receptions out of himself, Akers, Henderson, and James Cook. And he has the highest and second highest receiving yards out of all 4 of those guys. To me, that screams he's the best receiving back out of this group. His quarterback is not mobile in Matt Stafford, and so his opportunity for dump-off passes or even screen passes in this McVay offense are a lot higher for me, I think.
Yeah, you threw a lot at us right there, and it's great information. It is great information. One point that you made that I don't think people factor in enough is the pass blocking ability, because we're seeing some hype for Rashad Penny this offseason.
Yeah.
And, detractors will talk about how he wasn't on the field very much early in his career. Well, he was a terrible pass blocker.
Yep.
And then that hurt him. And when Chris Carson ended up being really good at running the ball and pass blocking, it kept him off the field. You don't want that to be an issue with a young running back, especially one that has a good quarterback that teams really don't want to have injured. And when you're talking about Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen, being able to pass block as a running back is something that will keep you off the field, as it did Penny with Russell Wilson behind him.
Yeah, honestly, to that point too, like I think it's one of the reasons that Zeke stays on the field for the Cowboys is he's a very good pass blocker too. I think at this point in their careers, Pollard probably is a little more explosive, but Zeke, if you remember week 1 last year, Zeke was on the field for most of the game because he was stonewalling that Tampa Bay pass rush. So
absolutely important.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things I've always said about Kyren is I think he's the best pass blocking running back in this class. And that's going to get him on the field to get more opportunity in other areas of the game.
To go a little bit deeper, when you look at the Rams, once you get past Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, the pass catching tree is up for grabs after that.
Higbee, maybe. Van Jefferson, who started to excel. And then the running backs. And like we talked about, I think Kyren can be the best one out of those.
And when you look at Buffalo on the counter, you've got Diggs, Gabe Davis, Jamison Crowder, or McKenzie, whoever you look at there, Dawson Knox. And then even Singletary is not a terrible pass catching running back. They don't use running backs traditionally as much in that role. It does seem like they want to. They tried to sign JD McKissic, and then he ended up returning to Washington. And then they brought James Cook in. So it does look like that's part of their offense they're trying to improve upon and utilize more. But it's not nearly as clear of a path to targets for a Buffalo running back as it is for a Rams running back, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And I just pulled it up. Singletary the last 2 years has had about 40 receptions each year, which is it's nothing to balk at. That's a decent target share for a running back, I feel like. So how much of that is Cook really going to be able to eat into? And the one thing I don't know about Cook is like how well of a pass blocker he is, since that's the one thing we talked about with Kyren. I don't know how well he can pass block. And so I don't know how fast he'll be able to get on the field for those higher value football plays that will then create more opportunity for fantasy.
And that is something hard to gauge for a rookie running back, because unless they are really spectacular in college or really bad in college at that, it's hard to know how that's going to translate to the NFL, because everything is just so much faster and stronger. So guys like Kyren that really excelled, you can predict. Guys like Penny that were just horrific in college, like it's probably not going to get better right away in the pros. But those guys that are in the middle that you just don't know, you just got to see it on the field. So that's something that is obviously yet to be determined. So here's the thing. We did talk about these backfields. Now, the one thing I will say is Kyren almost needs, or you would assume looking at on paper, almost needs two guys to go down in front of him to really get a big rushing role. Whereas Zach Moss hasn't been very good for Buffalo. So a Devin Singletary injury could boost James Cook into a bigger rushing role. Do you see that as an issue when comparing the two? Obviously, drastically different values, and that's built into James Cook's value. But do you see that as another roadblock for Kyren to get that type of production?
I don't, because I think Kyren's better than Darrell Henderson and will easily climb up the depth chart to be number 2 behind Akers. Or even if Akers somehow falls because of the injury, I think Kyren can slot himself in at that 2 role pretty easily. So then he wouldn't have to necessarily wait for 2 injuries to move up to number 1, maybe even just 1 injury.
Yeah, and I would love to see that. I'm obviously, anybody that's watched any of my stuff, I'm a big Cam Akers fan. I think there's a lot of talent there, but we have to, obviously that injury, not a full season, basically just the playoffs removed from returning. So that may or may not be something that keeps him from being full go and full efficiency at the beginning. Both of these offenses are to love. Both of these younger running backs have drastically different fantasy value at the moment, but both do have some upside if that opportunity presents itself for them in the 2022 season, and I believe are worth taking shots on in fantasy drafts because of that. One thing we know, running backs, touches, equal points. They don't have to be the best running back. We've seen the Jeremy Langfords and the Dontrell Hilliard last year, and Deonta Foreman.
Najee. I feel like Najee's a great example because, like,
terribly inefficient.
Yes, exactly. But had that volume, man. And you knew he was going to have it. And that was why I was so high on him last year.
Yeah, for that, what do you think? Obviously, Kyren's value isn't super high right now. There's probably a slim chance that he underperforms.
Yeah.
But what do you think his chances are of hitting production that's looking at the values of each of these running backs we would expect from James Cook and producing ahead of James Cook?
Man, I'm going to go somewhere between 50 and 60%, I think. I feel like he's got a good shot to move up that depth chart simply because of, sorry to beat a dead horse here, but the pass blocking. I feel like that's going to get him on the field, and that's going to allow them to see the true talent that he has to be a 3-down running back, and then he can hold off the other 2 guys or even be the lead back in that stable, to where I don't know if it will be that hard to necessarily outscore Cook. Because if Cook is battling with Singletary all year, I feel like the 50-50 share versus maybe a 60% share for Kyren once he gets there, we'll end up having him score more. Did
I
that
love
answer
it.
that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking at. Everybody's been giving a percentage because I explained to everybody this is just a range of outcomes that my guest thinks is possible, and we discuss it and to give people an idea on players they may want to target later in drafts or in specific tiers. And I love it because not only can it add value for people in redraft season this year, but dynasty going forward. Because if you really believe Kyren can make a jump in year one, then he is criminally undervalued in dynasties.
Yeah.
And we have a big dynasty following. So those people, he's basically free in dynasty. It's not
Yeah.
going to cost you a
can
whole
get
lot
him
to
in
acquire him.
third or fourth round of your rookie drafts, and if you've already had your rookie draft, you can probably throw a third or a fourth rounder at him to go trade for him.
Absolutely. Now to end this, we don't do a lot of promotion on these to keep them short, but you run a great league. I just joined last week, excited to get into this, but it's called Paulies Playoff.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people just a little bit about that and where they can sign up, and I'll put all the details in the description here.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So Paulies Playoff is a tournament to end Alzheimer's. So my wife's grandmother, Polly, passed away from Alzheimer's 3 years ago. And so it was right around the time that I had started to grow my fantasy following and my platform had gotten big enough. I was like, I'll start a charity tournament. It's a super flex tiered PPR by distance charity tournament. We had 120 year one. We had 240 year two. We're in year three trying to get up to 240 participants again. And so basically you play for 12 or 13 weeks and then playoffs work similarly to Scott Fish. They're a little more, I'm trying to figure out how to simplify them so they're a little easier to follow, but playoffs go through and then you got a champ at the end of the season.
It's great. I'm excited to be a part of it. Like I said, details will be in the description below. Go sign up. It's 20 bucks.
You can sign up. I've got a pinned tweet on my Twitter at FFShaneB where you can sign up now.
Awesome. Shane, I want to thank you a lot for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you like this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and the notification bell below so you don't miss any more coming up. And if you want to know why Cameron Brate has a shot to be a top 6 tight end, click the video up here. Make sure to follow today's guest, Shane Barrett, on Twitter and at Paulies Playoffs. Information is in the description below.